Hello, I'm Stuat Wiley. I'm an IIS program manager. It's also known as the Web Infrastructure Team. And I'm going to go over IIS 5 in the Whistler timeframe. And I'm going to limit the conversation pretty much to 64-bit, and I will go into a little bit of the IIS 6 content. So let me get rolling here. WIT is the Web Infrastructure Team. It's a combination of IIS and COM Plus, and we've now consolidated, and I'll explain a few reasons for that in a few minutes. Whistler, our objectives were pretty simple. Stay with our design mantra. I'll go into that a little bit. This is a port, 32-bit, 64-bit, full feature, full function, and I'll explain that also. Capabilities that we brought into IIS 5 are retained. Again, it's 5.0 plus some interesting features that we put into 1.1, and then a little bit of 6 we'll go into after the fact, but those will not be in the Whistler release. Our customer needs have changed slightly. The web business is changing. We now are focusing a lot of our attention on the ISPs and ASPs of the world, so we have a separate set of needs to get feedback from those customers and the influential individuals in that space, and I can give us some contact points and we can follow up with that a little bit later. The fixes and the features, 5.1, I'll go through that a little bit, and then I'll talk about some of the 6.0. That's the basic agenda here. Our mantra, security above all, common IT and common web issues. We are always improving security. Make sure that you're always checking Microsoft.com whack security. Daily updates. Administration, bringing down our total cost of ownership and management, the product. Programmability, making sure we have a robust layer for development and a platform to continue into the future. As always, supporting all the internet standards as before and improving on the ones that we have. Reliability and availability, bar none, is our primary concern. If you're not available in the web business, you're not home. We look for the dial tone. We're always there. Scalability and performance, always. Scaling up and scaling out. We scale out very well. We now scale up very well, and I'll get into that a little bit with some of the Itanium issues. And performance. So improvements from IIS 5. What you're getting in the Whistler 64 timeframe, at least in the early adopter release, is truly a 32-bit port over to 64. Scalability was our main concern for that. From a hardware perspective, going from 2-chip, 4-chip, 8-chip, and up, and making sure that that's reliable. Making sure we fully support the 32-node Windows load balancing. Reliability, IIS reset and IIS restart, making sure that the service can flip without you having to reboot boxes and the applications stay running. Performance, increased performance, tuning, tweaking, and such. We have some white papers, the art and science of performance tuning up on Microsoft.com website. That will also apply to the 64-bit platform and the Whistler timeframe, and we will add to that as we gain information. Again, it's a full code port. We want this thing to be on par, 32-bit, with the 64-bit. That includes doing live pre-release testing, and I'll go into that. All of the 5 features and a few 5.1 features we'll get in. I'll talk about the features themselves. If you're not familiar with the IIS 4 base architecture, it will not change for the Whistler timeframe. 5.0 and 5.1 are also supported by this. Primary market, our primary need for 5.1 and forward is to address the ISPs and the ASPs, the hosters and the development houses that also host. One of our criteria moving forward is to make sure that we focus on the 5.1 deployment blockers. What are you seeing that keep you from deploying on the web and keep us from being the most effective web platform we can? We want to quickly fix and respond to customer needs and make sure that we're driving those needs into the future design. We will consider design changes as warranted. However, our code base is fairly locked at this point. If it's critical, we'll sure look at it. Reliability and stability. For those of you that deployed IIS 4, we heard you. We've also done an extensive amount of testing on 5.0 in production and with a variety of customers to make sure that we have quite a few runtime hours live in production. We have that basis to fall back on. We have that experience now. The IIS 5 product is holding up on Windows 2000. That will increase for 5.1. And we'll increase our level of testing for the 64-bit on the Itaniums, giving you another platform to use as an option. Microsoft.com, we work hand in hand with Microsoft.com. The www.microsoft.com servers that you hit are primarily the ones that we address in the IIS team in use in pre-deployment. So when those are being cycled or used as lab testing for us, that literally is giving us real-time data on the stability, on the reliability, and on the performance under real loads at one of the larger .com sites in the world with quite a bit of content that's heavy, XML, ASP, and the other types of testing that's going on at Microsoft. So it's not necessarily a given lab scenario. We do very well with that. New to our testing and test structure and deployment efforts is moving the Intel.com flagship website over to Whistler, and also helping them make sure that that is tested in production. We will take it in the lab and test it here, and we'll also test it outside. And then some other select ISPs, ASPs on an invite basis, and joint development partners. Please contact the people running those programs for any information. Common goal is density of the box, scalability. Single boxes, we want to go from what is a practical limit of 3,000 to 4,000 websites per box currently to around 10,000 sites per server in the future product. We're looking at some of those increases for the .1 time frame, and it's actually designed as a hard goal for the 6.0 time frame. The upper end on the current architecture is roughly 5,000 websites. So we've gotten the density up. We want to roughly double that in the near time frame for Whistler. By working tightly with COM and COM Plus and tightly integrating with that, we will have created a capability of increasing your number of out-of-process applications. What that means is you can have the protection of being out of process and not running in the core INET info process, keeping the web service up, and yet having the speed and performance available to you. Your availability is high. And again, on a single box, multi-proc, or multi-box load balance web farm scenario. Our goal on that is a roughly 200 out-of-process isolated applications. And I'll get into partitioning a little bit later. We want to continue to make sure that we have tighter integration with the OS. In particular, one of the performance gains that we would like to see is a shorter startup time than 5 minutes, and that's a goal, and we're working on that tightly. Also in performance, we want to make sure that we maintain ourselves as the fastest 64-bit web server and 32-bit web server. Again, ASP is fast now. We want to make sure it stays up there, and that IIS continues to outperform competitors in a like scenario. We're doing a lot of work currently in-house with Intel, some engineers in-house, and the IIS performance team is producing the white papers that you will see on Microsoft.com as a result. Live load and production testing and tuning. Again, I talked about that with the various .coms and the partners. That data goes into the tuning and tweaking and performance design for the future as well. The features in 64-bit, again, are the same as the IIS-5 architecture and features. High level of support for internet standards in the area of web DAV and web folders, allowing the collaboration, use of Office 2000, and continuing to keep the platform as useful as possible in that arena, using HTTP as a transfer mechanism or the worldwide network to support remoting and remote capabilities for customers and clients. FTP session restart is something that we had been asked for in 4.0. We dropped it and put it back in. It reliably allows you to drop a packet, pick it back up where you left off, do some error checking, and then continue until the entire connection is finished reliably and quickly. So that was something we put back into the product. HTTP compression for clients and that support it will speed the transfer of the data from the client to the server. And then digest authentication, it's a reliable way of getting your authentication through firewalls and proxy servers. Management, lowering the total cost of ownership and operation. We put in reliable restart, again, to keep the server available and the service level running, even if an application fails. Again, I'll talk about that a little bit more. Delegated administration is the ability to have your administrators push out a level of authority to anybody else, such as an operator, an additional operator, either sharing the load of administration or allowing people to have parsed out components with their own levels of security and controlling their own space, website permissions themselves for publishing and application running, and still maintaining the control underneath. The application protection and throttling is the differentiation of the processes. Again, in 5.0 we have in process, pooled out of process, which is new this year, and isolated out of process. Pooled out of process allows you to run multiple applications in a single process, protected from failing and taking INET info with it. Security enhancements, again, that's a high level of interest for everybody, and we continue to push to make sure that we're as secure and locked down as possible. From a development perspective, I'll walk through some of the ASP enhancements, a little bit of the Complex integration. The one thing I did want to point out is ADSI 2.5 support. Supporting the standard allows us to use DS and use the other Active Directory interface capabilities to script the metadata of the web server, so you control a variety of configurations. Again, this will all move to 64-bit and Whistler along with all the other pieces. So let me just walk through that again from an internet standard point: DAV, FTP restart, compression, and authentication. One of the things for management that was really key this last year has been our ability to back up and restore a web server, especially in a web farm scenario. We've now cleaned that up. We had a couple of issues in backup and restore to different machines because the metabase was dependent on a machine key. We have taken that bug fix and pushed that out. That will be in the Whistler timeframe as well. Process accounting efforts are increasing. The throttling allows you to set a CPU level on an application running in isolated out of process and to determine the CPU use. You can do process accounting to determine the use using the job objects in the operating system. Use the throttling then to give that application X amount of CPU over time. Allows you to do a little bit of box-to-box capacity analysis prior to deployment. Variety of configuration options to scripted admin, remote deployability through terminal services, and quite a few additional configurations, including I believe 7 new security layers that you can address for some needs. Security. Sockets, Secure Sockets Layer 3.0 will be supported as well. Server-graded cryptography allows people to export 128-bit applications, and actually IIS itself. You do have to have a client that is 128-bit enabled. And again, this is something where you must request this capability from a certificate authority and put that piece together. But it allows financial institutions now to export the web technologies that they need to do their business. Far away and above was our support call queue in 4.0 were how to set security, how to check authentication, how do you know if the permissions were drilled down all the way through the operating system. What we've done is create a few things. I hate the word wizard, but literally they're helping the users figure out the decisions that need to be made to set the security themselves. There is also what is called the lockdown tool available on Microsoft.com for security. I suggest that anybody running IIS 5 currently take a look at that. Make sure you understand the implications before you use the tool, because it will set system file locks. Again, this will be improved and moved forward into the Whistler and ported into the 64. We continue to support the IP and internet domain restrictions so that you can block or let through various individuals based on their IP and or a superset domain and any variation thereof. Kerberos 5.0 supported in the OS. We continue to support that, and as they improve their capabilities, we will also be directly supportive of that. Forteza is the government standard for security. That will also be moved over to the 64-bit and the Whistler platform. Programmability and the development. New flow control methods that we've put into 5.0 will be enhanced and improved a little bit in 5.1. In general, we have things such as server.transfer that allows you to have an option when you're writing your code versus setting an include file. For example, you read down the ASP page, instead of processing an entire ASP page, when it hits a server.transfer, it will automatically go over to the the transfer page, another ASP page, so you don't waste the overhead of reading the page and processing. Improved error handling in ASP. This is the 500-100 error used for debugging ASP. It literally will let you see the source code of your ASP application. This is for use in lab testing and or debugging, not necessarily in production, so be careful with that. XML support will continue, and we'll move that forward, and we'll continue to try to improve our handling of XML, the inlining with ASP. Currently, XML and ADO can work within IIS. You can stream XML directly into record sets, database record sets through ADO, and we think that's going to help for a lot of the websites that have database backend, SQL, and such. That is one of the key areas, the ISP, ASP areas. So the feedback we get on that type of processing is very, very important going forward. As you move on to maybe a 64-bit platform and an architecture deployment using that instead of a larger server, maybe a farm would consist of 32-bit boxes and 64-bit boxes for larger file size and address spaces. We would like to know what people's experiences are with that so that we can consider designs moving forward. ASP self-tuning is basically the ability to create threads and or to block threads based on the load that the ASP processes are incurring and sort of self-manage the utilization of the resources. App protection continues with the isolated and the pooled isolated applications. Partitioning is new in 5.1. I can't personally go into too much detail, however, essentially this will allow you to start with an application and evolve it separately. A user or an identity coming into IIS can then, based on their authentication, their credentials read out of the directory services, can then use a separate application which will only use a partition of a process or a piece of a process. Therefore, you have that isolation as well as some others. The processing is a little bit more efficient, and you also have a little bit of the protection in between them. For example, you have dev, you have test. You may have two separate accesses of basically the same application, but you want to run them in different processes or sub-processes. Partitioning will allow you to do that. So we've put that into 5.1. That is a new component. Again, ADSI 2.5. That's supported now. As the ADSI standard increases, we will try to keep up with it. This will allow you to add custom objects and properties and methods, same as you do in 5.0. The idea is that you would use this then to control the metadata for the configuration of the server. And that's pretty critical for the Whistler timeframe. We're going to look at a slightly different model moving forward. Customer issues. Fixes. Any known problem areas we have now? This is the 5.1 goal and mantra. This includes the automated test bugs that we have uncovered and or problem areas or potential problem areas that we've isolated. Backup and restore issues, again, the machine key transfer issue, backing up, and some people are using the backup and restore to actually migrate servers forward. The actual way to do that is maybe a rolling upgrade versus a backup and restore. However, people who who have chosen to use a backup and restore for that type of migration have found that the machine key blocks them from going to a different box. It literally has been a problem. We don't recommend that you use that for migration and or upgrades. However, we're working on those issues and becoming more tightly integrated with the catastrophic backup of the OS. UTF-8 fixes in ASP. These are fairly well known internal to Microsoft, and there are a few fixes in that area we're taking care of. We're considering extending our event model to support WMI and writing a provider, and that's going to be a piece going forward. I'm not exactly sure the status of that, which is why I put consider on here. I believe that the majority of us are very positive about that and the benefits it could bring to us and the customers and performance in general. The ability to monitor based on a virtual directory level is now going to be part of 5.1, which is not in 5.0. A little bit more about the programming, and this says SSL programmability. It's a little bit misleading. What I wanted it to say in general was that programmatically you can do work on SSL activities in scripts and whatnot. You're not actually programming SSL itself. Again, the ADSI enhancements, ASP template cache tuning. again, for speed reasons, for handling of ASP in general, making sure that that's as optimum as possible. We have done some work in this area, and we're also working to enhance our DAV support for 5.1, and we'll have some specifics a little bit as we move forward. 64 support, that's generally just meant to say this is Itanium. I mean, we are fully supporting the 64-bit Itanium charter with Intel, again, doing the testing in-house, doing the testing and deployments and or test deployments live in production prior to release of the early adopter release, and that's a charter we're going to have for later on in this next quarter. Making sure the reliability and the performance improvements are solid, rock solid. The ability to deploy on this platform in any configuration, whether it's 64-bit, 32-bit, in a web architecture is largely up to the deployment itself to determine. The architecture needs to be supported all the way up through data center, Windows 2000, and we intend to continue to do that with IIS. So the feature sets will be identical. Improving on the manageability and the operational costs are also something we're going to do, and we're waiting for feedback from anybody on what they feel should be the key areas in that. Beyond 5.1, I'm going to touch a little bit on the 6.0 features. Again, this is still in flux, so take it with a broad view. We're going to move to text-based configuration. Essentially what we're doing is moving to an XML model so that you can look at text and edit it directly and drive that. We will continue to maintain the scripting model that we do as well as the UI model. So those are being flushed out. People that are in the ISP and ASP area, we're absolutely concerned about how you see these as being either beneficial or not at all. And that feedback is more than welcome. The biggest architecture change is that we're moving to what's called a kernel mode listener. This is running as a worker process in the kernel, and it routes to a user mode process. The piece called WAS, or the management model, then would control what requests went to what process. So now you can move across different processes with your application, as well as maintain your existing code base while writing for the future in the pieces of Complos that we're evolving as well. Process isolation, again, protecting the applications and the subcomponents of the applications from failure or failure from each other's failure is a key piece of this. Being able to monitor the process clear down to the thread level is something that we do now for debugging, but I think we're looking more tightly at how that works and the granularity needed to determine the resource use, the CPU use, and whatnot, and the actual applications using and calling the resources and the threads and the subthreads to instrument the product, figure out what's running right, tune the apps, that type of thing. Process cycling or recycling, this is something that competitors have. We find that spinning up a new process is expensive, and that's something that we need to do for the future, so that's in the spec. We're realizing that the application functionality that the users and the customers in the enterprise are requesting is going to be quite heavy and distinct from what it is now. Hosted applications will include knowledge management on a distributed basis, mail, again, on a distributed basis, and some new development tools that will work in that environment in the new world. Integration with the business logic components and the enterprise data, a lot tighter, less of an N-tier piece and more of a dovetailing and overlapping integration, a little more flow, and that type of thing. They have the same needs as the ISPs and ASPs. Again, that's one of the key markets that IIS in particular is going after, but management is a big one. How do you use the management on a farm? What if it's a distributed farm? You know, these types of questions. So we're looking at that. We want to be able to scale up the manageability to hundreds of servers and probably thousands of servers at some point. Scaling to thousands of sites, again, by density of the box, scaling out from that box density, and also scaling up to the various hardware sites or hardware configurations. Service level agreements require highly reliable application environment, so we want to make sure that with this movement into the kernel that we're able to support that charter. Again, it's a way of making sure that thing is always available. Think of it as a dial tone. we're there. Remote management tools, this has been a common request. Currently we ship with Windows 2000 and terminal services and also the HTML admin that allow you to do remoting and remote administration. However, we need to extend that so that various types of administration over distributed types of web farms is also possible. That's probably misstating slightly. However, we are not exactly sure of the needs of the ISPs and ASPs in that space. So that's, again, where we could use some feedback. So the HTTP listener or kernel mode listener, it's a simpler driver code path for the requests, routes to the process and the user layer. It also allows port 80 to be shared. Again, that's a difficulty in the fact that everybody uses port 80 right now. So we need to make sure that as much of this can be shared as possible. This will queue up requests for the applications, even when the application is down, resetting, failed, whatever, and then continue to process when the application comes back up as maybe a service starts or an application would return on a request or a database request or something of that nature. So it's a little bit more of a store and forward type of a handling, reliably waiting for the connections to happen instead of timing out or perhaps raising up a queue and then going away on you. Response caching, catching static data, easy reuse, a little bit faster, making sure that you have everything in memory and able to dish it out as quickly as possible. When you're serving cache pages, there won't be any kernel to user mode transition, so that overhead and that management level within the operating system and within IIS itself is not there. Isolation, continue to isolate the applications. Currently it's done in dllhost.exe. We'll continue to work on that as well. It doesn't affect other processes, and you can also use the process partitioning to then have applications using sub-partitions to not affect each other as a partition, and then that single process that they're using. Process rotation, again, is another way of stating recycling. So we have a configuration manager we're working on for 6.0 in the admin service, managing all the application configuration, both from text-based or XML and also to respond to scripted administration, ADSI and beyond. So this is the way to respond to changes in the configuration files themselves. So it's more of a change notify, a little more programmatic way of driving the configurations of the server dynamically and statically depending. You can set up the virtual pages and the namespace groups with this, dynamically drive those. You can interact with directory services and the other pieces of the OS to do such a task. And the process manager, I spoke about WAS or the web application manager itself in 5.0. It's called WAS and it's the 6.0 planning. It will actually manage the application processes and make sure that the request is handled correctly across the processes. It will periodically check for an application's health and automatically restart the crashed applications, may take some other actions. Again, some of that is yet to be determined. However, the thresholding will be robust enough to be extremely useful. Configuration, XML based. It's a little bit of a redundant text here. We will support the backup and restore of a configuration or backup and restore of a configuration store. XML is one way to do it, so it is scriptable, it's readable, you can get in and edit it directly. Secure information obviously will probably get hashed and things of that nature, but this is a very familiar model for the coexisting administrators of the Unix or the Apache with the Windows or Windows 2000. Again, the ISP model or the ISP-ASP model in particular. And we would like some information back from anybody that has particular requests or requirements in these areas. We're going to make sure that the configuration is exposed via the Metabase APIs and the architecture, maximum backward compatibility, especially for applications, especially for programmatically driving the configurations of the servers. Again, the web farm scenario, multiple boxes, multiple configurations, ease of laying down a standard template across multiple boxes or a series of sites on a single box, that type of a thing. We'll continue to provide access through the base object if you want to write it in C, and also through ADSI, a little bit of an abstracted layer, and WMI for the event management and event handling. So in summary, the Whistler IIS product is a full IIS 5 and 5.1 feature set on 64-bit, on par 32-bit, improved reliability, the application isolation, the recycling, the automatic restart, the resilience that we've come to know is extremely dependable and reliable in practice right now and in production on a lot of .coms and a lot of ISPs. A lot more flexible configuration and management with XML and the scriptability. With WMI, we expect that also to improve. Performance, using the kernel mode caching, HTTP caching, again without the transfer to the worker process for certain items, that will improve the speed. Being kernel mode will also improve on the resilience. And then compatibility with any of the platforms that we support now. We're going to work on that as we go into the future. This is the baseline. So feedback in the ISP, ASP space, people that are using web services now, we need to know what it is that you're looking at 5.1 beyond. We're currently in the design phase of the beyond, and we can get you some contacts for that. So let me move forward and take any questions if you have some for me. That's a good question. The question is IIS 5.1 going to fully integrate into directory services for UPN authentication? That I don't know, and that's one I'll have to take later. We have a few things going on right now in that area. Some of the questions are coming from institutions that want to support things such as single logons and that type of architecture, and this is peripheral discussion. I don't know what the status is as of today, but I can find out for the individual that is asking here. And spread that out. Let's see what else we've got here. The question is, the goal is to handle 10,000 sites per individual server. Is that 10,000 unique IPs and DNS sites, or just multiple host headers per IP? I believe moving forward it's a combination of both. At this point in time, especially with load balancing and Windows load balancing server on advanced server, you can actually do a combination of both. So you have a matrix available to you in 5.0, and I believe we'll increase that. So the statistic that I was referring to is literally, well, specifically multiple host headers per IP on a single box, per a single IP. Virtual sites on that type of thing. Again, let me check on the detail of that, but I believe that we are moving that forward to make sure that you can do that in an architectural fashion so that you can support all the increase in the DNS sites as well. Same type of question. It's just IPs or host headers, and again, the goal is to do both. Currently, host headers per box, virtual sites, that type of thing, but we want to increase the number of IPs as well beyond its limit as it is today. And I believe we're going to work on the number of IPs primarily in the 6.0 time frame. If there are performance or if there are improvements that we can do and get them in for the 5.1, we'll certainly do that. And I believe a lot of this is coming from Dell. Dell has been working with us on some scalability. So the gentleman that's doing the scalability testing with Dell is the guy I have to ask about the IP. So I'm going to defer until I can talk to him, and I will get that answer back to you on both of those. Same, the DS for UPN authentication question. Again, that's one I do have to check on. There's one that I can't actually see any subject on. Yeah, okay, App Center. The manageability improvements that App Center is going to give us in the near term will be supported by our 5.1 and 6.0 timeframe. Obviously, they're working on a current release or current beta of App Center. Their next version then will be more tightly integrated on top of what we would have released as the 5.1 or the Whistler release. 6.0 will probably see a little bit more of an integration between the two concepts. Again, as we find out what the ISPs and the ASPs and the web farm scenarios are, the thousands of boxes and or thousands of boxes at thousands of sites and how to roll that up, I believe that there will be more of an integration and discussion with those teams as well. The App Center team primarily was started with individuals from IIS, so we understand each other fairly well, and from a management's perspective, they're really our arm into the distributed web farm space. So IIS will put in any support that they decide is necessary, and we can do in our designing. 5.1 is, again, as I said, it's a little bit locked, so that the current betas of App Center are 5.0, and then the next work that they're doing is more geared toward the 5.1. We haven't done any changes underneath that they will not be able to take advantage of, that they couldn't take advantage of today. That is my understanding. With a few noted exceptions, possibly the WMI. Remote admin of SSL certificates. Yes, that's the scriptable handling of the SSL certificates, and that's what I was trying to point to when I said the SSL programmability. Literally, you can do remote scripting and process the SSL certificates by that nature. So you can do the remote handling through terminal services or whatever you want to, as cron job or any other kind of process, and move those around and get them out there. That's been a common requested item. I actually cannot address ASP Plus or ASPX. What I can say is, based on the kernel mode listener, the HTTP kernel mode listener, that ASP Plus will be able to sit on top of that with its processing pipeline on the new processes. So the idea is that you would retain any existing applications or code uses in ASP that you have now for iNet info, and also be able to use their model moving forward in their process model. So yeah, we will support it in the 6.0 time frame. They're also working to run currently, and in fact, as I understand it, their pieces that they're working on currently work on Windows 2000. So there will be a little bit more integration with them moving forward. I'm not exactly sure of the details of that, but their process then will become handled as a user process, handing off to that from the universal listener or the kernel mode listener that we're discussing in 6.0. But they do run on the Windows 2000 platform now, as I understand it. That's pretty much it. Questions that I'm not able to answer, I'll take notes on those, and we'll distribute that as soon as possible. And then feel free to give us feedback. We'll also distribute a name and a contact or a contact point for additional questions, additional feedback, and additional design ideas and requests and requirements that you see moving forward. We're interested in making sure that we're able to be as functionally capable as a platform as we've ever been, and moving forward we want to continue that. So thank you very much for the time today, and let us know what you're thinking.